g7, bishop e3. So about a year ago, I played an over-the-board event, and I faced this line with the black pieces in the second round. And I actually played g6, so we had this position. Ended up winning the game, but I had a really bad position, and I didn't like what I got. So the following round, this is 2 rounds a day, right? Typical American tournament.
Yeah.
I have no time to prepare, and I'm paired against Andy Woodward. Idea. And I played bishop d3 with the white pieces in the next game. And that was the first time that I had played both sides of a position in consecutive rounds, and I managed to win that game as well. So I have good memories with both colors in this bishop d3 variation.
Okay. And like, how did you handle this position with the black side? So did you go develop the knight to c6 or knight goes to d7?
I'm definitely not proud of the way that I handled it. If memory serves me right, I started with knight c6. Now, what you often see is white's bishop retreating back to e2. So people shouldn't be too surprised if you see that, because the bishop in the dragon setup is quite misplaced on d3. And then I played the move h7, h5, which is not unheard of in the knight arf, nor in the dragon, just trying to prevent white from expanding on the king side and preventing this typical queen d2 bishop h6 idea. My opponent ended up castling kingside and getting a nice positional advantage, so I still didn't like what I got.
Okay.
Something tells me that Danchenko is probably going to play this more conventionally and either castle or push b7, b5.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I also have a question about Danchenko. You know, he's on half point out of 3. In his game against Wijk, first round, he took a very sharp approach. In his game yesterday, we saw him play in a really positional way. He tried to keep everything solid and draw against Anish. I mean, which approach should he be taking? He's chosen a sharp position. Should he now kind of go to something solid, or should he just go, you know what? This is my moment in the spotlight. Let's play as ambitiously and as aggressively as possible.
Yeah, I mean, he has essentially 2 openings as far as I know. He can play the Caro-Kann, which is his more solid choice, and here he's gone for his more ambitious opening, the Najdorf, and I really like that. I mean, Jan is the kind of player who's going to give you chances. Like, if you can get a really sharp position, this is how you score an upset against someone like Nepo. So I like the choice of a Najdorf, but I'm a little bit worried in the early going that Danchenko doesn't seem too fresh in his memory of this line. This bishop d3 variation is very dangerous, and like I said, you can slide into a bad position very quickly in this system if you're not precise. So let's wait a couple of moves until I give you my verdict, but right now I'm a little bit worried for Danchenko.
Okay, then. Well, let's go back to the bird's eye view and have a look at some of the other games.
Okay. The Firouzja Abdusatorov game has quite a few developments with a black knight on d4. Wow. I'm kind of taking all of that in. The Dingley-Ren Progdananda game looks a lot more like an Italian now than Rui Lopez.
Okay. And yeah, and I'm just checking out the Caro-Kann because that one is piquing my interest, because Magsudli chose a line that is known to be relatively solid. So we've seen a change of approach from Magsudli. Knight e7, c5.
Yeah, let's take a closer look at that Caro-Kann. The White's last move, bishop c1 to g5, also seems kind of awkward, but clearly, well, not so clearly part of Wei's preparation, but most likely still part of Wei's preparation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting opening that Black has chosen. What Black wants to do with putting the knight on e7 and the knight then on c6, as Dania is indicating, the other knight on b8 heads to d7, and then you just want easy development, castles. And you tend to meet this against most white setups. So it's quite a simple system to learn and master. But bishop to g5 is not something that I've especially seen. what is the point of making this bishop move? Because to my eyes, I would just be playing bishop e7, block the attack.
Yeah,
And
this is
what
the
is the
question.
problem?
What is the issue with bishop? I mean, I would understand if you could guarantee that black has to play queen c7. Then, if you can induce queen c7, maybe white can go something like knight c3 and try to quickly get the knight to b5. Try to play this very tactically. There's also some sacks on d5 that could potentially happen. For example, knight takes e5. Already, you have to start calculating knight takes d5, and this could
Yeah.
get very unpleasant. Or knight to b5. But black
Knight
is
to
not going to do that.
b5 is something to be very worried about. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
black
you
is
can
just
see.
underdeveloped.
Yeah, totally. And
But
white is soon gonna stick a knight into d6. No, you don't. You don't want to be going in this direction.
absolutely not. But the big question is, as you said, what happens after bishop to e7? Okay, presumably white's going to swap the dark squared bishops, which is not necessarily in either side's favor. It really depends on the position. Maybe the idea is to play this weird move, trying to get a handle on this position. Knight d4. Another candidate move is to play c4 and try to stick the queen on d6. What do you think about that? c4?
Yeah, c4. You tend to meet that with d takes c4. So I don't see why that isn't a great reaction here.
And if I stick my queen on d6, you can just probably ignore and get your knight out and start hitting my weak
Yeah.
pawns on c5 and e5. Interesting. Maybe in this position, instead of queen d6, I can try to get my knight out from a3 to c4 to d6.
Okay. Well, it's a nice plan, but I guess you can go queen takes. I'm just making sure that there's no tricks or anything. And if you just go queen takes c5
I'll pick up the pawn.
and then castle.
Yeah, this kind of position is hard to evaluate because the pawn on e5 is sort of the classic, both a strength and a weakness at the same time. It's an anchor for the d6 square, but of course it's also a liability at the same time. But after rook c1, feels like white's position, I don't know, maybe a smidge more pleasant.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not easy to develop the knight on b8. Like, you might have to be doing some weird things, just retreating the queen, getting going to e7 or something, or maybe even d5. But I agree, it's not entirely pleasant. So maybe there's something there for white. Okay, let's rewind.
Let's rewind. So the current position is after bishop g5. This is the decision that Parham has to make. So we are very cold on queen c7, just because, I mean, it runs into a host of things. That queen is very awkward. Other than bishop e7, of course, there is the move f6, but honestly, nothing Parham does really shocks me anymore. But f6 would be pretty shocking.
Yeah, I've never seen f6 before in this type of position. Yeah,
Yeah.
I normally have a guideline that I play for f6 if c5 has been obstructed. That's the only time that I'm playing f6 very quickly, not in this type of position. So for me, it's so much more natural just to go bishop e7, and
Yeah.
maybe after c4 finding a better idea. So maybe it's also occurred to me that I could also, if we go bishop e7, bishop takes, not after
Okay.
you wanted to challenge immediately, which I think makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, black is getting in their knight d7s and putting pressure on the center, and that feels to me like it's fine for black. Queen takes.
Yep.
So the time is now. So c4, and I feel like you have to take on c4.
Have to take on c4. Yeah. Queen takes c5. cd looks
Yeah,
very cd.
it's all pawns and no hope, as you see there in the chat. And okay, knight a3.
Yeah. So this
And I'm
position's very
wondering,
likely.
yeah, and I'm just wondering whether instead of going queen takes c5 immediately, maybe you can go make moves like c3. Maybe you can also go knight to d7.
I really like c3. This is a very typical motif. Your logic is, okay, I'm already losing the pawn, so I might as well give it up in a favorable version to ruin your pawn structure. Now, if white just plays b takes c3, then after queen takes c5, I think with the presence of these very
Yes.
weak pawns. Okay, queen takes e5 apparently is very bad for some reason. Maybe it
Knight
runs into this
d5.
nasty. And this move is not possible because now that suddenly the bishop is controlling that square. So sometimes your moves have unintended consequences. But okay, black doesn't have to touch this pawn. Black can just
I
start
think
by
you can,
castling. Yeah.
yeah, and then you can back that up with knight d7, knight takes c5. I kind of really want the maximum positive outcome for black. I'm very, very biased in black's favor. I will work hard to prove that black is fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say if only we were talking with someone who's ridden something on the Caracan, knows something about the open, that would be kind of nice.
But you know something, I was thinking about the things that chess improves. We make a big deal about how chess improves, your concentration, your creativity. I can add another one: stubbornness. Most chess players I know are incredibly stubborn people. They don't know when to give up.
Absolutely, which is a good quality on the board, maybe a good quality off the board, sometimes a very bad quality off the board. But I think there's something to that. You have to believe in your openings, especially at the lower level. I think at the top level, the players are truly universal, so they don't necessarily develop as much of an emotional connection to what they play. But I definitely feel that way about the King's Indian, for example. Like I want it to work out, and I'm not going to concede the point until all resources have been exhausted. So very interesting move, Bishop G5 by Wei, challenging Parham Maksulu to an early decision. And I'm thinking it's very likely the game will unfold exactly along the lines that we described. But with Parham, you never know. He can make a move like Queen C8, and we've come to expect that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back to the bird's eye view and take a look at some of the other games in progress. There's been a lot of developments. Where
Whoa.
should we go to?
I think I'm going to break our, generally we tried to kind of go around the horn, but there's actually quite a few explosions happening. Van Forest versus Vidit. I think we should maybe go back to Firouzja Abdusatorov for just a minute and figure out what's going on there, because Noderbik continues to blitz out his moves, and Alireja is the first to take a longer think, especially because these are two tournament leaders, and then we can keep perhaps going around the horn.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, most of the other games, they're on move 10, between move 7 and 10. This one on move 20, and they're still in theory. I mean, there's 4 games in the database that I've got here in front of me. And
Ooh.
maybe we can rewind a bit and see what happened after the knight took on f2. So presumably, the game followed the way it should, with rook takes knight and then f6. And after... Okay, knight f1.
Okay, I
Knight
assume
f1
this
is
is the main move, or no?
it's not the main move. I think the main move is pawn takes pawn.
Right.
I've commented a lot on Shaq's and Liam Lia's games, so they're normally going e takes f6, or facing that rather, and knight f1, bishop takes, king takes, and now fe5. Yeah, you have to go back with the king to g1.
So White gives away the pawn, but buys himself some time and tries to reach safety with his king. Interesting idea. Okay.
Yeah, so everything played here is pretty normal. Even after knight e3, which looks, I mean, it looks like black is simply going to go bishop takes knight and start looking at the white king. But in fact, that's not the best move. The best move is actually to retreat the bishop. It's the most played move.
Wow.
I think it's on account of the fact that, yes, the white king is exposed, but the knight can drop back to g2. The bishops are now pointing towards the black king, and all is fine.
Yeah, wow. This is some computer chess. Bishop g4 and back d6. Obviously, Noderbik is fine with a draw by repetition out of the opening of the black pieces, and Alireja is not. So he declines repetition with this move b3. Okay, opening up a little diagonal for his dark squared bishop, and now the central strike by Noderbik. d4, boom. C takes d4, knight takes d4. We get a big trade in the center. Takes with the queen. Okay, and very understandably, if Firouzja agrees to the final trade, queen takes d4, e takes d4, black will get this massive pawn phalanx in the center. That looks like a very unpalatable position for white because the c pawn is just rumbling forward to c4, and so Alireza moves his rook out of dodge, and Noderbik gets his rook into dodge, rook a to d8, putting pressure on White's queen. And you're saying that this position has still seen precedent, occurred a couple of times. Do
Yes.
you see which games? Anything high level?
Okay, so I will check into, relatively high level. So you have Jan-Krzysztof Duda with the white pieces facing off against Igor and Igor Lishish. Maybe you can help
Lissy.
me with that.
It means
Lissy.
bald in Russian,
Yes.
believe it or not. Igor Bald.
MVL played at Tabatabai, and then Jonas Bear against Igor Lisi. Now I know the pronunciation. So it's got a score of 3.5 out of 4 for White.
Okay, not the most flattering statistics, but I know that Lissy is actually an opening expert. So if he's playing this, then that must mean there's something to it. Okay, so what's going on in this position? What is White thinking about here? Well, my instinct for White is to play a move like queen to e2 and try to get the dark-scored bishop out. I mean, you would love to play bishop b2 and chase the queen out of the center. So my question would be, okay, what is Black's intended response to a move like queen to e2? I wonder if this is among the moves that were played by White.
Queen e2 was certainly played. It's interesting because Lissy did try queen e2, and then he also switched to queen e1. So he's tried both of those ideas. And Black's idea was just to go bishop f5.
Bishop to f5, using tactics to swap light-scored bishops. Wait a minute. And if White plays bishop to b2,
then
the queen can drop back. Yeah?
b6.
Understood. Looks pretty fine for Black. I mean, you have 2 pawns and a rook for the pieces, and after bishop f5, rook f5, yeah, this feels dynamically equal. I mean, maybe White plays king h1, the rook drops back. Looks okay for Black.
Yeah, I mean, Lissy showed a nice tactical point that you could go rook f4.
Ah, very nice.
And so the idea is after bishop takes e5, well, there's too many pieces on the e line. And look at that. That is a nice geometrical pattern.
Yeah, one Black piece just sandwiched in the middle, but picking everything apart. So if White can't win the e5 pawn by force, Black is super active. A lot of open files for the rooks. Okay, the engine is giving approximate equality. Yeah, this is obviously what Noderbik is hoping for, and this is a great choice. He's not necessarily playing the most ambitious line, but another case of great preparation by Noderbik, which he seems to display regularly. Queen e2 on the board.
It is definitely great preparation, but it's a preparation with a lot of risks because the position is very imbalanced, obviously, with a rook against her 2 pieces. And it also means that, again, if White doesn't coordinate their pieces in the right way, or Black doesn't do the same, then they could be in big trouble. It really isn't like a position where the sides are playing for that small, slight, stable advantage. Here, it's going to be all about piece harmony.
Yes, and if you're Noderbik, you have to do your homework. And doing your homework does not just mean, blitzing out all of the prep moves, but also understanding where the rooks belong in the ensuing position, how to keep White's pieces at bay. As you indicated, White's bishop on b2, very active. And I think Alireza may be breathing a sigh of relief, like, okay, I'm not going to lose by force. At least the position has stabilized. Noderbik now taking a little bit of time. Doesn't mean that he is out of his prep. He might just be remembering his file. But I think we're very likely to see bishop f5, bishop e2. Okay, now that the smoke has cleared on this board, there's a lot of more smoke to be found on 2 other boards. The Nepo game and also Van Forest versus Vidit is going absolutely crazy. So perhaps we should swing over there. What do you think?
Let's go over there because it just looks like White has formed a cluster with their minor pieces. And let's have a look at what's happened here. And also, Van Forest is a pawn down.
Yes. Okay, what is happening?
No, sorry, it's a pawn up. Vidit is the one that's a pawn up, is what I meant to say.
Correct. So this was a four knights, which started out very peacefully, but it wasn't a four knights scotch with d2, d4. It was a traditional four knights with bishop e5. Okay, yeah, everybody who's passing this board is casting a glance at it